Welcome to another episode of the Progressively Yours podcast. It's one of your multimedia directors again, Sarah Shahed, and this episode launches our new Caucus series, Keeping Up with the Caucuses. Today's episode will be spotlighting the Muslim Caucus, who recently hosted a speaker event featuring Fatima Iqbal-Zubair, the Progressive Caucus Chair of the California Democratic Party. If you happen to miss the event, you're in luck. In just a second, you'll be hearing the contents of the event in its entirety. Thank you to Zaid, HSDA's current Muslim Caucus Chair, for cooperating and sharing Ms. Zubair's insightful words with all of HSDA. Without further ado, here is the Muslim Caucus's conversation with Ms. Zubair.
Yeah, I thank you so much for having me here. I think you all have a really great program, so I don't need to, say too much. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Do you want me to introduce myself, or is that part of the program already? I can kind of share a little more, but
If you could introduce yourself.
okay. Yeah, sure. So I am the chair of the Progressive Caucus of the California Democratic Party. In my day job, I also am the legislative affairs manager for California environmental voters. And so I help pass, transformative policy for environmental justice and also democracy issues, expanding voting rights. And I'm really fortunate to work, with a great team in Sacramento. I'm up there like half the week and work here in LA, and just my home in South LA the other half of the week. By my professional training, I'm actually a former science teacher from South Central LA, the Watts, Compton area. So a lot of the reason I even got into politics and organizing was very organic. It wasn't like, oh, I want to run for office, and just gonna, try to create that path. It was more like seeing the contamination of the soil, the water, just the inequities in our community that led me to even get involved in politics. And, since this is a Muslim space here, if we're, for lack of a better saying, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu, right? We're seeing what's happening now with the crisis in the Middle East, and how it's very one-sided rhetoric. And it's important for us to, be voices in the room, because really all of our freedom, our freedom in the Muslim community is really tied to everyone else's freedom. And, so it's really important that we advocate, for us, for our community, and for really all communities. It's really important. So
All right, so with that, I'd like to ask you your first question. So you emphasize a lot of the importance of having people that to represent you. So, what does civic representation look like to you?
So the first thing that comes to mind when you ask what civic representation looks like is just of the people, for the people, right, and by the people. That's really what it looks like. It's not saying what's politically popular, what is, good for one's career, what is, advantageous, right, to one person. It's really what's advantageous to society and communities all over. So that's what like civic, engagement like looks like to me, and just like, being involved. And we really come, the fact is, right, our democracy has really gone away from that because of the military industrial complex, because of corporate money, because of big oil money, because of police money and, ICE money, all that's infiltrated, and lobbyists. It's really strayed away from that. So it's really, really important that, we maintain civic engagement that is not connected to those forces, that is not for self-political gain, but like for our collective humanity. So that's really what it looks like to me. It's why I do the work I do during the day, up in the Capitol. It's why I fight and sometimes get a lot of pushback for the things that I say, because I don't think, one should really be in a position of power or influence if you can't really be courageous. It's totally fine to be part of a movement and like, in a movement, but if you're, trying to be a leader or like a main advocate in something, you should really do that only if you have courage. So.
All right, thank you for that. And what progressive policies are you currently advocating for?
Well, there's so many. I think, well, so right now, obviously a lot of my work is around environmental justice and environmental policy. And that to me is so important because, oops, sorry. because, for me, like, I'll tie a little bit of our faith in, there's a lot of, like, places in the Quran, there's a Canaan ayah that says that we are stewards of this earth and we protect this earth and we, protect everything in it, right? Even plants, right? Even, animals, even insects, right? There's a lot of ayahs that refer to that and how, it's really important to be stewards, right? And protectors. And that's actually a lot of where, like, the lens I take this work to is that we can't live in a society that where we're extracting and profiting. It should really be about, well, this is God's creation. So how do we protect it? How do we keep not just humanity, but all species really, and like our planet, right? That is really a gift to human beings, protected. And so that's a lot of my work right now. But I also, uplift, in my outside of work role, I'm uplifting, obviously, like if you've been following my social media, I try to uplift, a lot of what's happening, in the Middle East. I also uplift just any really good progressive policy across the state, from housing to civil rights to, really any progressive issue. I mean, so that's what I do as Progressive Caucus chair, is um, I try to be bold on on basically all the issues, but yeah, a lot of my days spent on environmental justice issues, right? Because that's where I work. So
So you mentioned how Islam has affected what policies you do. So how has Islam in general affected your specific work in public service? And on top of that, how has your experience as being an immigrant woman affected your decision making?
yeah, those are really good questions. Because so one is, how is me being an immigrant? Can you repeat the first part? How's that affected, right? Okay.
Sorry for that. I was
Oh, that's okay.
asking, how has Islam influenced your work in public service and decision making?
Okay, yes, and then how is it as me being an immigrant woman, right? As the second part. So okay, so really, how Islam's informed my work in public service. Okay, so I mean, really, the thing I go back to is that we're taught as Muslims that if we ever see oppression, right, in any form, right, it could be something as small as two people fighting. It could be something as small as, you know, um, someone who's unhoused, right? That, like, is not even like a, necessarily a huge worldwide fight, but we're taught to not to do something about it, right? Thinking that it's bad is like probably the least good thing you could do, but the best thing you could do is actually acting, right? More than speaking, acting on it. And so that's really what's informed my advocacy and why, I use my faith when I tell folks that aren't Muslim, like, this is why I'm not really afraid of, those in power, right? Because amongst God, right, amongst Allah, we're all equal, really, right? Our titles don't matter. It's really the strength of our character. And so that's informed a lot of, like, why I do it, because I think as Muslims, we're natural born advocates. Like, we can't see something that's happening that's wrong and not do anything. It's literally part of our faith to at the very least think that it's bad, but at the most act on it. So that's informed my public service and decision making. And then as an immigrant, I mean, that's informed, I think my view, because this country was really founded like by immigrant, like on well, not, it was actually indigenous, right? Indigenous folks. It wasn't, this country was already there before. But you know, sort of like, immigrants make up a lot of the country now, and I feel like yet we have these white supremacy structures that are in place to keep, whether it's the Black community, the Muslim community, the immigrant community down. We've seen, the lack of voting rights for the immigrant community, which limits our participation. We've seen, um, you know, what else? Like, we've seen, I mean, just like lack of access to basic rights. When you look at, how COVID affected, right? How society, how healthcare, right? Lack of healthcare access affects, right? The community, how pay, like, even, the wages, the right to be in a union, all these issues, immigrants are usually at the bottom, right? Rung, sort of. And so I think being an immigrant has really, like, helped me, like, have, like, empathy to others, especially as someone who's visibly immigrant, right? Like, because I'm very visibly Muslim, and so that's, I think, given me the ability to have, like, empathy towards all of these causes, because one, I've lived through a lot of those situations, but so I think it really helps. Yeah.
So I believe that most people know you for your run for the California State Assembly. So could you tell us what prompted you to run and what was the experience of running like?
Sure. I am getting a important call from like a parent. So I need to like just give this phone to my husband. Hold on 1 second, okay? I'll be
All
back
right,
in
thank
a
you.
minute. 1 second. Buzzle, I'm getting a call from their parents. They call them back. I don't know when. Just call them back. Okay. All right, go ahead. Ask me the question again.
So you're most well known for your run for the California State Assembly. So could you tell us what prompted you to run and what was the experience running for the seat like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I feel like that could be a whole other presentation because there's so much I want to say there. Okay, so what, because it was an experience, right? We could talk about it for a long time. But what prompted me to run was kind of what I alluded to before. I never like planned to run for office. But sort of working as a teacher, having a son with special needs, I saw like the inequity in the school system. I saw the inequity in, just economic inequality. I'm a renter myself. So, I just like saw so much. And then really what got me to run was the environmental injustice issues, like the presence of lead and unclean water in places in America, like appalls me, right? We have so much money and we shouldn't have those issues here. And then, when I, chose to do work in the community and was just in different community spaces. I really saw that, there was a disconnect between our elected leaders and, what community members were really asking for, right? And that's where I ran because, the current rep in office was, to this day, like, it's not really voting on policies for clean communities and a host of other issues. Perfect example, related now, he's made a statement to just, stand with Israel and not really talk about and kind of erase Palestinian lives, right? Things like that. I mean, when you have politicians like that, really their worldview applies to every other issue, right? From housing to environmental justice. It's a very one-sided industry, driven, you know, corporate interest, special interest driven agenda. And so that's why I ran. My experience running, was actually, it was great speaking to the community and voters. Like that's the thing, right? When you're engaging in community, that's always the best thing because you're just like you're listening and you're learning so much. And but I think some of the hard parts, definitely, I think, being Muslim, like I would just say, like, I believe you all are under the Democratic Party, right? Kind of like, yeah. So it's really important that you're here because, you know, I definitely didn't feel fully protected. Let me put it that way with the Democratic Party. I mean, there were things that were said about me by my opponent where nothing really happened. There was no consequence. Um, I'll give you another example. Like, when the party had their convention, they had it on Eid al-Adha, like one time when there was a resolution that said that, keep track of all the religious calendars. So these things still happened. I've had to advocate for like a prayer room. So, I mean, here's the thing, right? And I'll say this is maybe not the popular thing to say, but um, while there's good people in the party trying to make change, right? It's really important that we are like our needs as a Muslim community are really acted upon, right? And that we're not just props for, what all these special months that come up, right? Whether it's AAPI Heritage Month and all that, right? Because the party and other groups will use us as props for those things. But it's really important that we speak to really the needs of what we need in spaces and what policies really care about, and that's acted upon. Um, and that's what I will say. So when I ran, that's what I kind of found. Like, I mean, I ran as a Democrat, but I didn't feel completely protected by those in the party all the time. And that's unfortunate, right? That I'm saying that, right, as an immigrant woman. So yeah, but that being said, the people on the ground, right? There's so many great Democrats too, like, just at the doors and just great people that really are inspiring and are really uplifting. Like I didn't encounter like, racism when I went to the doors really, like, I just felt it a little bit, kind of the microaggressions, a little bit from those kind of in power in the party. I mean, and sometimes a lot, not just a little bit, I felt it. So that's the unfortunate thing, but I think that's why it's really important to um be really proud and visibly Muslim and, in the full identity you are, because we need to come with everything we are to all these spaces so that way, we kind of, we're there and we're present and we demand, justice and really equal treatment.
So you talked a little bit about the microaggressions and things you faced regarding that. So especially for us being young Muslims, we always have to deal with just the lack of understanding and all these tiny microaggressions. Being so visibly Muslim, how do you deal with it personally?
Yeah, I first want to say, yeah, I've already heard of like, um, hate crimes and stuff happening in schools to, whether it's, yeah, like young Muslims and, also like, there's other, Jewish kids that are probably experiencing things too on both sides, right? And how do we deal with these microaggressions? Um, it's tough because a lot of that came with experience, right? Me growing up, like just it's sad to say, like it's hard when you're a kid because when you're a kid, you shouldn't really have to deal with microaggressions, right? You're growing and learning and developing, and like that shouldn't be something you face. But I mean, I would say the way you deal with it is make sure that you have folks in your life, like whether it's your family, a group of friends, spaces like this where you can share those experiences and like just be there in solidarity. Because I'm not going to say you can solve the problems, because a lot of times, and I know in some districts it's really hard to solve because you don't have those on school boards that are on your side all the time, right? So just have spaces where you can, at least have a community to like express those what's happening. And we have places like CARE, that it fights for civil rights. So when there's things happening, I know like there was someone at El Camino, right, that CARE was helping, because of something that they had said, right, that was supporting Palestine, that and CARE stepped in. So I think if it's really serious, and really everything's serious, but if it's serious enough where CARE can take it on, right, like that should happen. If it's other microaggressions and things, I think having that space and community, and also like not being afraid to advocate, right, and spaces. My son, for example, has autism, and I just had his friends here. They have a robotics team together, and we talked about doing something for Autism Awareness Month, right? Like just presenting something to the students, the teachers, but stuff like that we could do for the Muslim community too. Like just educating folks. It's not going to take away all of the racism and the hate and microaggressions that might be happening, but I don't live thinking that everyone out there is a bad person. I think sometimes people are just followers and they don't know. And I think if they know, if they humanize Muslims and humanize young Muslims, I feel like it would change, it'll make a big difference. So
I would also
So
mhm.
like to ask a question. So I know you mentioned these experiences that you have, and I guess tying it from more of the non-political end, how has your experience as a mother and as a teacher really affected both your run, your current work, legislative affairs management, and even your future plans and the way you interact with people?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as a mother, I mean, it directly affects my work, right? Because I always say, especially to Muslim women, like, like we're leaders, like, our faith teaches us to be leaders, or that's not just something for like, men to do. And it's really important. As part of my job, there's like 2 nights a week, sometimes more, that I have to leave my son, right? Like when my husband's here, but like we need to get childcare, and I make these decisions knowingly, right? So it's hard because of course I miss my son, right? Of course I want to be there for him like every evening when he's there from school. But I know I'm fighting like for his future, right? And I know he's also proud. Like he's talked about the things I do like in his school projects and stuff, right? And so it's difficult as a mom, but I think it makes me more empathetic to the work I do. And that's really important. As a teacher, oh, my work is always informed by what young people are going through. Like to this day, even though I don't work as a full-time teacher now, I still have a youth nonprofit where I work with first generation students and Black students in South LA, and we have a robotics team, but we do more. We do so much outreach to the community. That's not my day job. I don't get paid for it, but I still maintain that work for the same reason. It makes me always remember young people and all the work I do. It keeps me grounded because a lot of my work is with legislators, it's with influencers and stuff like that up in politics. And I never want to lose the essence of why I got involved. And that's really important, right? I will say this, we need to be careful of who we even run as Muslims, right? Because not, and God is the judge of this. I'm not judging anyone at all, but it's really important too that we don't necessarily support someone or uplift someone because they're Muslim, right? It has to be the right type of candidate, right type of Muslim candidate, right type of person, um because we have failures in our community too, you know what I mean? So it's like, and we have folks that, and I'm not the judge here, but like, we have folks that may not be doing this for the right reason. So like, it's really important to look at why someone is running for office, or why they're uplifting what they're uplifting, making sure it's really for the collective good, and making sure that they're really understanding the issues, and they're not just kind of, feeling like it's their turn to run for something, that they really feel passionate about it, and understand the experiences. That is really important. And as running as Muslims are being involved, I don't just go up there representing the Muslim community, right? I think part of what our faith teaches us, and I think it's part of our faith too, is that there's a reason as Muslims we don't do necessarily missionary work, right? Part of our faith is that we lead by example. I take that to heart. We're not just leading by example for Muslims, we're leading by example for everyone, right? About how upright we are, how much integrity we have, what our moral character is. And, I've had experiences in my life where people have converted, not necessarily maybe because of me, right? But maybe because I was a small part of that. And, they, of course, the beauty and the light of our faith, right? But that is really a part of our faith in, is making sure that we're doing things for the right reasons, making sure that we're doing things for the Muslim, not just for the Muslim community, for all of humanity, and honestly, for the sake of Allah, right? Whenever I make tough decisions on who I'm going to endorse or who I'm not, or I always pray, like sometimes I pray istikhara, and I'm like, am I doing this for my own good? And if I feel like I'm doing it for my own good, I don't do it, right? But if I feel like I'm doing it for justice or for a greater purpose, and if I have like a good feeling that I like when I after I pray I'm doing it, I do the thing, right? I do that decision, I make that decision. So I think I answered your question, but I kind of went a little bit also aside, because that's really important, that like that part of our faith is that we are an example for humanity for how we carry ourselves. And I take that to heart, and that yeah, so.
Do you have any regrets regarding your work in public service and through your political advocacy? Is there anything that you've regretted?
There's nothing I regret. And again, this it's not just because it's a Muslim space, it also comes back to like what our faith teaches us, right? Everything is already written and the ink has been dried, right? there's an ayah that says something like that. So I really believe everything we go through in life, whether it's an election that we win or lose, or whether it's something tough or a test, it's all supposed to be part of like our plan that God has laid out for us, right? To fulfill whatever our purpose is, right? As long as we're doing it for the right reasons. And that's why it's really important. And I don't have any regrets, actually, when you ask me, like, even though, yeah, I'm in debt from running for office and we have all these material struggles, alhamdulillah, it's actually given me opportunities too. Like I don't think I would be able to be working where I am if I didn't run for office and have built all the connections. I don't think I would be chair if I didn't really, follow my organizing and run for office and be an advocate and just follow whatever I thought that, God had maybe put out for me as like, and for each of us, right, as our purpose, whatever that is, right? So I don't have any regrets. And I think part of our faith teaches that is that like, the pen has been lifted and the pages have been dried. So like, as long as we're doing things for the sake of Allah, and as long as we are, doing things with the best niyyah and intention, we really have nothing to worry about, right? I mean, that's how I feel.
And also, I just wanted to ask, where do you see the future of Muslim advocacy and involvement in government go in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So next couple of years, I mean, it would be great to see more Muslims, representative of our community, in the right Muslims, right, in office. We see what's happening now with the Middle East crisis and how one-sided it is. I made a very bold statement about it on my Instagram because it's frankly disturbing, So we need more representation, right? I think it is important. But I think the future is, our strength is in our community coming together, voting, registering voters, but making sure, like a lot of times I feel like, our parents or our people, at our mosque, like don't see changes and so they don't vote or they don't get involved, whether it's volunteering and stuff. So I think that's really, really important. I also think that it's important to be in solidarity with other marginalized communities because that is our strength. I really believe in intersectional advocacy, right? We might be fighting for something, and we're seeing it happen now. Like with, for example, with the Palestine issue, right? You're following Black Lives Matter in LA. I don't know where a lot of you are, but like I'm sure all others too. They're really going all out, right? And supporting, what's happening, supporting fighting against, what the Israeli government is doing. And I think we have to learn from that. Like our issues also, like, we should be in solidarity with other communities as well, because when we're fighting white supremacy, a lot of marginalized communities are fighting white supremacy, right? It's not just us. And so I feel like when we are in solidarity, right, with all of those that are oppressed, it makes us stronger. So I think that's something I want the Muslim community to do too. And that's why I ran for chair of the Progressive Caucus, right? I could have ran for chair of the Arab American Caucus, right? But it was an intentional choice I made. We work closely with the Arab American Caucus and all the caucuses, by the way, so no disrespect. But I personally, the reason I ran for chair of the Progressive Caucus is because that is my lens of advocacy that I want. Is really intersectional advocacy. To me, what being a progressive means is really standing up for marginalized communities and being for the people. That's what it means to me. So, and that's the reason a lot of our programming now that we're going to have, hopefully a lot of you can join our caucus, by the way, I'll send you our link, because we're having great programming on housing, partnering with the Renters Council, on reparations, partnering with the Black Caucus. So we're doing a lot of great advocacy. We had a panel on caste. I don't know if you all saw that, but we're doing a lot of advocacy and intersectional advocacy, because I think that's how we can, uplift all of us together.
So before I move on to the questions from audience members, I would like to ask, what advice do you have for anyone wanting to pursue a political career or in public advocacy?
Yeah, so the advice I have, and I've been asked this question before, it's a good question, is to always, don't think about what you want to pursue and where you see yourself. You should really get into public service. And it sounds really simple because you're following, right, that element of oppression you're trying to fight against, whether it's in your family, your community, your school, wherever it is, right? Don't sort of look for the end result. It's really about that journey. And if you follow kind of your authentic self and you do things not for yourself, but for the sake of justice, right? That is my advice. Always check your intentions. And that's something our faith teaches us too, right? Our good acts aren't going to be counted, right? If our intentions aren't pure and good. So one advice is always check your intentions. Why are you doing something? Are you doing it for your own self-gain? Are you doing it, for a title? Are you doing it for popularity? Or are you doing it because you really want to be a part, right, of something positive that you want to change, and you see that need in your community? That's my advice. That being said, right, it is important to build relationships, right, with electeds in your community. That is also an important thing. You don't have to agree with everyone, but those in power have access to budgets and resources and are voting on bills and, can endorse in races, right? So you want to have those relationships with them, but make sure they're authentic and they're not you're not changing yourself for any of those people when you meet with them, right? Any of them, you're being your authentic self. You're able to have productive discussion and discourse, right? And that's really what matters, because I will tell you this, politicians even that I work with and those in power, they can see right through someone who's just trying to talk to them because they're trying to get an endorsement, right? They really see that. And those that are kind of more establishment based, maybe they don't really care, but the ones that are really for the people, they really want to make sure that you're authentic and you're coming at them and that you don't agree with them all the time, right? That you are just honest with them. So yeah, that's the advice I would give.
All right, thank you. Now I will open up questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
I sort of have a question. So my first question was, how do you combat, kind of talking with the opposition or just, kind of handling them? There's many, oppression, or I would say just negative stereotypes that are correlated with Muslims as a whole. I can name a few, but I won't because there's many. But how do you deal with them? Because sometimes they become unmotivating to you, and they're meant to push you back and not let you propel forward. So I just want to know, how do you combat that? How do you combat those issues and situations?
Yeah. I mean, I face that. I feel like sometimes in Sacramento, I've talked about this to my boss up there. I've had to prove myself, because there's, I'm probably, I mean, like, I feel like sometimes I'm the only hijabi up there who's a lobbyist. Like, I haven't seen any others. Sometimes I see, when I know there's Muslims at the Capitol and stuff where CARE sends some people up, but yeah, I've been alone and I've had to, I will say this, some of the people, I don't want to name names, but like, there's some of these legislative caucuses that have put out strong statements and mentioned Israel and not mentioned Palestine. I work closely with some of them, right? Because they're really good on other issues, right? I will say, and this sounds like a really simple answer, with those same people that you're seeing on social media that had said maybe not the right things or felt like they weren't standing up for our community, I've had conversations with them behind the scenes about the Middle East crisis, about other issues. Sometimes it's not necessarily something in us, right? I don't want to feel like we have to fix it or we have to be better or do different or find ways. It's really them, right? It's really them having the courage. Because I know some of them, they believe certain things behind the scenes because I've talked to them, but there's this gap in how they express themselves publicly, right? So, I mean, I would just say increased conversations are important. I would just say, like, stand up for yourself though. Like, if there are things that happen where you're really disrespected, I'm not also saying like, oh, let someone disrespect you, just walk away from it, right? If there's real disrespect and hate directed at you, I've actually called it out. I've called it out respectfully. I've said, hey, that was a really hurtful comment. And, whether it was about my Muslim identity, whether it was, I thought a stereotype they had of me, I've called it out respectfully, Islam doesn't say just like walk away, right? We do have a right to defend ourselves as human beings, right? So that's what I would say is like, I think it's setting situation by situation, you know what I mean? I don't believe in shaming people. Like, let's say someone criticizes me in a crowd, I'm not gonna say, oh, you're like a racist, right? Or like, I would probably have one-on-one conversation with them because I also think about strategically what's the best way to really get through to them and have them see my humanity. So that's kind of the way I would approach it, is focus on connecting with them as human beings and don't engage in shaming. But a lot of times one-on-one conversations don't work right away, but they do plant seeds and they do eventually lead to change. I have seen that. So that's my advice.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. And I really like how you mentioned like advise people sort of privately, like don't necessarily immediately resort to publicly, you know, going upset at them or anything. And that's something that's encouraged in our faith as well. Like we have to be able to advise people privately, to actually converse with people and not just attack and attack. So how, and especially as Muslims in the Democratic Party, not all the values of the Democratic Party fit in our faith. We have a neoliberal, whatever modern world that we live in, and driven by capitalism and other materialistic other things that don't necessarily always fit with our faith. And how can we take a party that doesn't necessarily fit with our faith 100% and still stand up for our faith when speaking up to other people? Like,
Yeah.
what are the best advices that you'd have to us as high schoolers and beyond?
Yeah. I don't think there's any party or any political party that will 100% represent anyone here, whether we're Muslim or not, right? And I think that's why the majority of America is like our independents, right? They don't affiliate with either party. And I think that's why. I also don't want to say that the Muslim community is a monolith, right? There are Muslims that are Republican, there are Muslims that are Democrat, there are Muslims that are independent, there are Muslims that have varying, stances on different issues. So what I would say is that I don't think, I think, I mean, the Democrats say this a lot, like we're a party of a Big Ten, right? We're a Big Ten party, right? So I think, I mean, I think that you just kind of, you should be, if you have views, right? I think you should find comfort in like sharing those. And like, if anyone really doesn't resonate with big things in the Democratic Party, then you don't have to be a Democrat, right? And vice versa for Republicans. So I mean, that's how I feel. I don't feel like, the Democratic Party completely represents me either, but it is the party that, I mean, I'll be honest with you. The reason I'm a Democrat actually is, I I want to change the party from the inside. You know, that's why I'm kind of like inside the party and I'm a Democrat. Like I couldn't be able to be chair if I wasn't a Democrat. I wouldn't be able to, you know, do all that. And I feel like me being in there is making change and holding people accountable, you know, Democrats that aren't, whether they're not representing me or representing the working class. That's why I'm in there, you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, so that's why I do it. I mean, I came, you know, a lot of my organizing came from like the Bernie Sanders movement. That's also influenced a lot of why I got involved. Actually, all the things I mentioned early in community organizing, that's when he first ran for office. And so, you know, that's what I would say. I mean, just like, you know, if you should be with the party that's closely affiliated to you, or you could be a no party, or anyone here could be a no party preference, right? But definitely don't be part of a party that you feel like doesn't represent you completely, you know. I don't know if I answered your question or that's like, okay. Yeah.
I had a question too. So this is more about like the recent events and what's been happening lately. So
Yeah.
how do you so like I know that like the American government as a whole and like how they're supporting more, you know, Israel over Palestine and how they're also sending aid and stuff like how do you feel like how do you feel like that our own like government is like saying things that we personally don't like advocate for and they're doing something that like we don't feel content with, like how do you feel represented and like what's your advice for like those sorts of situations?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And, you know, as someone who's in my adulthood, it's hard. It's still hard. And you all are younger than me. So I can't imagine like what you're feeling. It's still hard for me as an adult. Like even like I've told someone like I've probably vomited in my mouth, like, you know, the past 2 weeks because I've just been so disgusted at the reaction by even some politicians I know that are good on other issues that like aren't speaking up. It's really, really tough. You know, the advice I have is kind of related to my last question is like, I believe in like, I am an optimist no matter what. I believe that, especially as Muslims, we're here for a purpose. And I never put my hands up and say, you know, everything's like our efforts aren't worth it. It's as I say that, I do sometimes feel helpless when I think about people in the occupied, you know, parts of the Middle East, Gaza, the West Bank, and oppressed Muslims all over, oppressed people all over, really, right? The world. And it's sad because we can't do immediate things, right? To help them. It's hard to do immediate, like, and that's the thing that hurts. But the way I think about it is like, we can prevent future lives if we like advocate. Like there were rallies today and that was impactful like all over the world, right? From England, I saw something like, I don't know, there was one in like Iraq, like all over. The rallies that happened today. That's inspiring, so leaders can see that we're in solidarity. What I'm doing as caucus chair is I'm actually going to talk to legislators. I'm setting up group conversations with them because some of them, you know, like in the Black legislative caucus, the Latino legislative caucus, they actually posted something because they just were like, oh, their social media manager got something and they posted it. So one thing that's hopefully helpful is that some of these politicians, I think, are just kind of following a crowd, right? That they think is the right, they don't really know. Now, some of those, like, you know, like Biden, like they do know exactly what they're doing, right? The people that are giving increased funding, they know exactly what they're doing. So I would say in that case, like, you know, advocate, right? Send letters in. I think Jewish Voice for Peace, probably other groups that have letters like advocating in Congress and calls. I think that all helps. But the truth is we can't do anything to a life that's affected this very minute, unfortunately. What can we do? But we can prevent future lives and future injustices. And I think collectively as a movement, like what we do, even as one person matters, you know, like it matters. And we see that with the power of like all the people that showed up in rallies, right? Like the reason there's so much of a crowd is like they made a decision. I'm going to go today. I'm going to support, right? But I would just say like never lose hope because it's easy to lose hope. And like when we lose hope, then the other side wins. And like, especially when we're on the brunt of not being on the side of the oppressed, right? If we lose hope, then we've really given up and we've let really the oppressor win. So that's what I say is like, work together, you know, any actions that you see out there, do it, educate, right? Because I really think a lot of minds can be changed. Like a lot of people have followers, and I would say like probably half of the messages out there, if they humanize the Muslim community, if they humanize Palestinians, I don't think they'd be that way. There's this movie, right, that I think about a Ku Klux Klan member that like befriended like someone who was Black and they didn't know it, but then they realized it and they became like, it changed the person that was part of the KKK, right? They like didn't believe that anymore. In fact, I will share this interesting story. Saman, is that how I say your name? Is it Saman? Okay, I don't want to say it right. Is that right? Okay. In fact, I'll tell you right now, when I'm in Sacramento, let me tell you who I stay with, and this might give you hope. I stay with an older, he's like an older gentleman, and his partner, like he's in 70s or 80s. But you know, when I had to work up there, I was like really worried about paying 2 rents, since I was looking for like the cheapest, you know, place. And he had a room, and he's actually a former member of the IDF. Former of the IDF. He's lived in Israel, Jewish, right? And now it's like he used to be a former Zionist, and not since he met me, but like over the course of time and his experiences, he's like one of the leaders in Jewish Voice for Peace, and like he's like, you know, all out for Gaza, and you know, all that. So it's like, you know, how does that happen, right? So it can happen. And I tell people that story because, like, you know, that's where I stay when I'm in Sacramento, right? So we obviously, both of us, me and him, have complete trust for each other, right? Because I'm in his personal space, he's in my personal space, but we make it work, right? So, and alhamdulillah, right? Like, we're able to share our experiences. And he's a former member of the IDF. So yeah.
Thank you for answering that. That was really impactful. That was really good. I appreciated that a lot.
Of course.
What is your hope, or I guess your dream, for Muslims in the political space 15 years from now across the country?
I think my dream for Muslims in the political space is that, like, we have enough leverage and influence to affect the federal budget, to affect laws. I feel like still, you know, our voices, we're not, you know, our voices aren't being felt, right? It's not that they're not impactful, they're not being felt enough as strong in these spaces. And that's what we're seeing our government deal with the crisis and the way they're dealing with it. So I think we need to have more influence, and like we need to find a way to build that influence. Unfortunately, sometimes money is the way we get that influence, and you know, how do we do that, right? So how do we get our, because there's a lot of Muslims in the US, there's a lot of Muslims in California. It's not like we're limited in numbers. So I think the dream is like that we'd work together, we'll pick, you know, I don't think the Muslim community is a monolith. I don't think the Muslim community is going to agree on every issue. I don't, that's not my dream, because that also would be scary. Like if the Muslim community agreed on every single issue, then it's like, I don't think that's normal. Like that's not like normal for any community. But there are issues. There's like 1, 2, or 3 issues, right, that I think we can agree on, right? And my dream is that we can build enough influence to actually make a change to what's happening in Washington, influence what's happening in California, which is like the 5th largest economy. That is my dream, that we mobilize around those issues that we all agree with, and we see that difference being made. I mean, we see even with, you know, Rashida and Ilhan up in 2 of them right up there. And obviously we have the rest of the squad saying things to support, you know, an allyship. But we see the influence of even having a couple people who share our values up there, that what that's doing, right? Imagine not just that necessarily we have to fill up more of the seats, although that would be great too. But if we just had, like, you know, like lobbyists there with influence, you know, I think that would make a huge difference, right? Unfortunately, in our system of capitalism, use that word, right, Zachariah, like with capitalism, money is what talks. I don't really like that. So obviously that's a long-term goal, to not make money the only influence, because that's, we all know, right? That's why there's so much influence, and why we have the military industrial complex, because of money, right? Those having so much money, the defense industry makes a few rich, and that's why we have wars and all these things. So obviously long-term changing that system of influence is important, but I think for now we have to find the issues as a community that we are aligned on, that we can act towards, and then just strategize together about how we can influence those issues, right? And I think what you're doing here is great. So like for your space, because you all are California-wide, right? Space, is that true? Or you are?
We're
Washington, D.C.
What?
we're just
I'm Washington, D.C.
we're the entire country, so
Oh, you're the entire country.
yeah.
Oh,
So we
Wow,
have
I
people
realized that.
from California all the way to New York.
Oh, that is so cool. Okay. Well, you have the perfect space here, Zachary, to answer your question. To build, right? I mean, okay, what I would do if you're probably doing a lot of this, so I'm probably preaching the choir. I mean, I would be, if you are the Muslim caucus, are you guys the young Muslim caucus of the Democratic Party? Is that what you are?
We're the high school
High
caucus of the
school, okay.
Democratic Party.
So figure out what I would do is go to high schools where there's a lot of Muslims. I'm sure you might be doing this already, and like just recruit them. Ask them, even if they're active in their own space, to join your space and find issues that you all can work with. Because there's strength in numbers, right? I think that's important. Yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, and I hope you all have like, if you ever need help like visioning or strategizing for those one or two things you want to work towards, you can't do everything, but like no one can, right? But build in numbers and vision and strategize like what is the one thing you want to accomplish in like 2024, for example, as this young Muslim caucus, and work towards that. And if you need help, if you need, mobilizing for me, like any help, like in either that strategy session or like, trying to pass along, like if you guys are an official branch of the Democratic Party, right?
Yes,
Okay.
HSDA is officially chartered with the DNC.
Okay, then I should be able to even share your stuff through our caucus emails, like to build your membership, do more outreach that way. So yeah, just that's one way too, like find other networks that can amplify your voice. I used to live in New Jersey actually, so I grew up there. Was born in Dubai, lived in Canada, and then high school all the way to like grad school in Jersey.
Which part of New Jersey you lived in?
Bergenfield, Bergen County. Where'd you live?
Oh, Bergen County?
Yeah.
I'm in Union County.
Oh,
I
okay.
used to live in Passaic County.
Oh, okay. That's like more north, a little more north, right? But not too much more. Cool. Oh, DC. So Zachary, you can have some real influence with DC folks there, right? Do you go and lobby and stuff, or?
Yeah, I do. And I was like at the protest today, almost 10,000
Awesome.
people. So it's nice.
That's inspiring. That's amazing. Yeah. You all should, when you're at the protest, Zachary, were you guys recruiting? I mean, you all like, you should be like, here, sign up, like have like an iPad and just like sign people up. That's not selfish. You're mobilizing for the movement. So use those opportunities to gain supporters in your caucus here, because we know that this fight isn't going to just be this weekend. It's not going to be next weekend or next year. It's going to continue. And so this is how we build and we actually achieve that influence, right? The numbers matter when you have a lot of people who are activated.
Unfortunately, I was not recruiting, but yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, not actively, it's just, and it can't be like really active, but like you just have like a couple people with iPads and like, or tablets, and the Bernie campaign did it well, right? When the people were in line, they were like signing people up. Why were they doing that? To build his movement, right? So yeah, but I think that could be really strategic, because there are people that they're there because they want to make change, so they'll likely participate in other actions.
So does anyone else have any questions? Or would you all prefer we start wrapping this up? Huda, you can ask your question.
Yeah, so I noticed throughout your speech that you said that the best way to kind of advocate is to educate. And so I just wanted to ask that, what's the best way to advocate? Would it be in a more Arab-based community, or would it be in a community where there aren't that much Arabs and you would want to educate those other people?
Yeah, good question. I think when I talked about educating, it depends on the issue. First, I'll say that. Let's talk about like the Middle East crisis, right? Like, because that's what's happening like front of mind right now. Actually, it's people that I think about it strategically and as a lobbyist, right? Because I do that for my work. My whole job is like influencing legislators, like what can get them to like move on an issue. I focus on, okay, this is how I look at it. I'm not going to go out and educate people who are really on like the side of like the Israeli government. They're not going to budge. Like it's just like, I already know that, you know what I mean? Because I've seen their past. I actually don't, I mean, that's not going to be the focus of my advocacy, because I already know they're really sold out for propaganda and like that's, or whatever, right? That's it. That's their agenda. And then there's a group like probably like a lot of us here who are like understanding like the real history and like, the oppressed people here, not because we're Muslims, but because like we're all educated in this issue. But then there's a group in the middle that's like movable. That's how I look at them. So they might have like posted something, about Israel, but they did it because they just someone told them to post it. And they don't really understand the issue. That's the group that needs to be educated. So not necessarily that group usually isn't Muslims and Arabs. It's actually, it could be anyone, right? It could really be, it could be anywhere from, a Jewish person who's like unsure, like maybe they lived through their whole life and they're like, well, seeing all this propaganda that Israel's for Jews and like Hamas attacked and yeah, this sounds really bad, but I'm not sure. Like, it could be like a Jewish person who's like, what do I don't know how to feel about this. Like, and you could tell they're movable, right? Or it could be like in my case, like there's legislators that are, not Jewish, but there are other diversity ethnicities, so they can relate to marginalized communities, but they maybe posted something, but they don't really understand the issue and they're willing to learn. So when I reached out, they're like, yeah, Fatima, tell me what you need. Like, we're happy to have a conversation. So it's really those people in the middle that I see as movable, who aren't like really, really sold out to the other side, but they're also like not like necessarily, Huda, to your point, not necessarily for this issue particularly that they have to be identifying with Palestinians. It could actually be people, I think it's better that aren't, because the way we make change in the Muslim community is getting our issues to be understood by people that don't look like us or sound like us, right? That is really our strength. Like my housemate, right, David, who's former IDF and like who's Jewish. And I was like, heck yeah, like I should use him everywhere I can, right, as an ally, right, to speak up because he's white, like he's, you know what I mean, he's Jewish, and so when he speaks on this issue, like people are like, oh, he's Jewish, and he's seeing this, you know what I mean? So it's actually better to educate people who don't look like us in our community, because it adds more power to the issues, right? Because it's someone now who's not Muslim, because like there's this misrepresentation too that Palestinians are all Muslims, and that's not true, right? It's not really about the faith we're fighting here, it's about an oppressor and an oppressed people, right? So yeah.
I just wanted to add some more, like a kind of like a personal story, and like when you were talking, it made me relate to you because, like over this past week, I have seen like my school is mainly Jewish, like most of them are Jewish, and I've seen some of them posting stuff and stuff, and then I like talk to them about it, and then I ask them like what they think, and then they tell me how they think, and then I'm able to talk with them, and I'm like, well, this was like an ongoing conflict, and it's a decades long thing, and then they do get more, on our side, like they do like understand more. And I think it is like it really gave a good input that, once you advocate and you actually like spread awareness, then people become aware. But if you were like just scared and because everyone was like, like everyone was against you and like they were saying stuff, but once you do like talk to people, and I've had a lot of conversations, and it really like we got inputs from each other, and it was really nice to share our input, and it did help some of them like change their thinking.
That's good. Good job doing that. I don't think when I was in high school I've had to ever talk about like tough issues like that. So it must have been hard, but like you had courage and you did that and you saw it made a difference. And I 100% agree that I think change actually doesn't happen. The best change happens when you have conversations with just your neighbor or like someone at school. And like when enough of us do that, that's how we change minds. I think that's such power in that.
So, thank you for all your thoughts and answering everybody's questions. So do you have any final remarks before we close off?
No, just thank you so much for your advocacy. Don't ever be afraid to be courageous. And, I want to continue to be a mentor to each of you. So I'm gonna put my information in the chat, including my number. So you could text me if you want to keep in touch. You should all have your personal email too. Oops, yeah. So feel free to keep in touch. I would love to, just be a friend if you need it. If you're going through something difficult, be there for you. If like you need advice on something, be there for you. Whatever you need. If you want to collaborate on political stuff, if you're looking for an internship, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There's really the sky's the limit. Keep in touch. And yeah, just really proud of all of you. I wasn't activated politically when I was in high school, really. And so I really applaud all of you and think that what you're doing is amazing. And don't feel alone, like, because you're not alone. And like, I'm with you, so many others are with you. And yeah, I just think just keep doing what you're doing, and I'm here as a resource, anything you need. So